I hit continue. Okay.
There we go. So, good afternoon.
Hi, nice to meet you.
It is. To start off with, would you like to just say your name and where you are?
Okay, my name is Kevin McCann, and I live on the southwest coast of Ireland in a very tiny little village. Um, it's like 2 hours from Cork City and about 2 hours from Limerick City. Very rural area, very much tourist orientated. A lot of our economy would be based on tourism and agriculture. So they would be the two main things.
And
It's a very beautiful area.
do you practice there or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I practice. I have a practice at home. I also work internationally, obviously on Skype and Zoom, and I travel a lot teaching at other training institutes. So we have a very small airport, tiny little airport, which gets us to London, but it works. Yeah, exactly.
Lovely.
Exactly.
Lovely.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the first real question here, and this is fun because I don't know you, is who are you? Who are you as a person? Who are you as a human being? Your interests, your values, your passions, qualities. I don't know. However you'd like.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's a pretty broad question. I mean, who are you? That is the question I think most of us struggle with, I think, for most of our lives. Who are we really? But from a generalized perspective, I was born in the north of Ireland during the whole civil rights, how would you call it, protest marches, all of that. So that would be a really important part of my background. I came from a society that was pretty much divided around religious and sociological lines. And I'm absolutely certain that has informed me a lot as a human being. It informs my work, it informs my worldview. I'm very much involved in social justice. So I'm involved in using my Gestalt background to influence local issues around social justice and equality and issues like that. So I'm pretty certain my upbringing, my education in Northern Ireland informed that. I am a gay man. I'm married. My husband is Italian. And we live in a very tiny village. And the name of the village, funnily enough, is Camp. So of course, we didn't know that when we saw the house that we bought. We didn't know that that was the name of the village because they used a townland as the marketing tool for this house. It was only when we'd signed the papers we realized. So that's funny.
You'd gone to camp. Yeah.
We had gone to camp. We finally made it. We arrived in this place. I like humor a lot. I use a lot of humor in my work. I'm very well. I think I'm sort of funny, and I find it a very effective tool in my work. The house is obviously dual culturally because my husband's Italian, and so I have a big extended Italian family. I in a former life I taught gastronomic sciences for over 30 years. So my background is in food and wine and history of food art. So I taught that for over 30 years, and I have a passion for food. I love to cook for people that enjoy food. Not people who are going to make an academic subject out of it, but just people who can eat with gusto. I really like that. So that's still a very passionate part of my life. I like movement, dance, any form of dance, ballet, folk dance, Irish traditional folk dance. This area is very famous for it. So I like movement. I think you can learn a lot about people through movement and how they move. And particularly you can learn a lot culturally through traditional dance. So when I travel, I like to see traditional dance, traditional music. I'm a big music lover as well. From opera to rock to folk to jazz to blues. I mean, so our house is a very musical house. We play a lot of music. We eat a lot of food. We like the table to be full of people. Just having big gatherings of people really enjoy. Both of us really enjoy that. Yeah, I think that's one part of me. I'm known to be quite extrovert, but paradoxically, I'm also really shy. There's a part of me that's really shy. Some of my close friends would know that about me. They know when I'm going to that shy place. Yeah, I like people. I like meeting people. Yeah.
That all sounds very warm, and I'm hungry all of a sudden when I hear you talk.
Well, I just finished a beautiful Italian lunch of fried aubergines and calzones and all sorts of wonderful vegetables and olives. Yeah.
Now I'm even hungrier. Yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, I have another passion. Which is for the island of Crete. My husband and I discovered the Greek island of Crete. So we try and go there as much as we can. We find it just wonderful. It's like, of all the places in the world we've traveled, we both discovered instantly, this is it. This is where we belong. So we try to get to that island as often as we can. Some of our friends get bored with us talking about it so much, but we don't care.
Oh, why? So I'm curious, how long have you been married or together with your partner, your husband?
Oh, well, I often joke about this. I said, we're so long together, I think I'm going straight, because we fight about the normal things that everybody has difficulty with. We've been together over 20 years.
Wonderful.
No, 20, more than 20 years. We've been married twice. So we had a civil ceremony when it became legal some years ago here in Ireland. And we were really honored, really delighted that we had Bob and Rita Resnick from Gestalt Training Associates Los Angeles. They came and were part of our ceremony because we based our ceremony, or certainly parts of it, on their couples therapy model. So we had some aspects of their woven into our ceremony. And then when it became legal to marry, we converted our civil partnership into marriage. So effectively, we like to say we've been married twice, to the same person. So
well, it's good that you chose to do it to the same person.
Exactly. So yeah, nice. It helps.
So you said a bit about growing up in Northern Ireland, but I'm curious what comes to mind as a specific event, or perhaps a different or more about a set of circumstances in your life that you would say has shaped who you are.
I think what springs to mind, and what often still springs to mind, is how difference can be so destructive. How not understanding the other, not having capacity to reach the other through difference, how wanting to get rid of difference, destroy it, can have such detrimental effect on people. And I remember once as a young man, around 12, 13 maybe, driving away from our home, which had just been set on fire by the militia. And I remember everything we owned, everything, clothes, furniture. I think we got our identity papers and one or two small things. I remember driving away, seeing it going up in flames and thinking, this is just terrible. This is one, it was terrifying as a young person to see that.
Of course.
And then to see my mother's distress, and to see how distressed she was, that she really was homeless. Now we were all homeless now, and that really shaped a lot of my thinking.
Wow. I'm sorry that your family went through that.
Yeah, we had a pretty tough time for a few years. And it happened again because we moved to another area, and it happened again because my parents certainly always wanted to engage with difference. They always wanted us to have contact with who were our perceived enemies. But in the end, they had to capitulate to the reality that we would never be able to have a shared ground at that time. And so it became quite partisan. And that really informed my thinking of how I viewed the world, certainly after that, in terms of difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So in terms of how it shaped me, is I've always liked to have many different friends from different backgrounds, different cultures, trying to understand them, to see our commonality rather than our difference. That certainly was a big impact on me.
Mm. And have you been able to feel some of that, I would say locally, but nationally? I mean, through the different processes over time?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's been a process personally for me, to have to process the trauma of that. And then also to deal with being a man who's gay in a society that said you can't be gay back then.
Mm-hmm.
And so those processes were sort of parallel my own process of coming to understand and identify myself as a man who was gay, and identify myself as someone who came from a background of trauma due to that to different cultures. So simultaneously working through those has been really important for me.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
If that answered your question, I'm not sure if I
Oh no,
grasped.
absolutely.
Okay.
It's just kind of left me. It's impactful, what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm also wondering, in the course of your life, it can be from any area, if there's a particular person who stands out as having had an influence on you or being a significant person in your life.
Oh, there are so many. I mean, there really are so many. I could name one or two.
Mm-hmm.
One was an American lady, funnily enough, when I was a young kid going through all of that trauma. She was a very tall, loud, to me back then, American lady that I met in a laundrette. I was like 14, and to me, she looked like some Amazonian goddess who walked into the laundry. She was from Nebraska, which I'd never heard of. I guess
Sounds
most
exotic.
Americans, many Americans haven't heard of Nebraska. And we got talking, and she took me under her wing. They were working for the Goodyear International Tire Company in the north of Ireland at that time. There was a big factory, and many Americans were over helping get this factory started. And she took me under her wing and introduced me to American culture, introduced me to all this whole community of Americans who lived there, and set me on a path that, of course, they had no idea the impact that was having on me. They gave me a safe place, they gave me a haven, introduced me to these wonderful people who, to me, seemed larger than life, very positive, forward thinking, where religion didn't matter. To me, it was like, wow, it can work. People can be different and connect. So they wanted to bring me, actually. They wanted to adopt me. They asked my parents, could they bring me to the States and send me to college? And of course, my parents said absolutely not. But they used to take me everywhere with them. Yeah, but they were, I mean, they were pretty conservative. They took me everywhere with them, introduced me to dining out, which was something we didn't do as working class people. I mean, we were very poor working class people. We didn't go to fancy restaurants, hotels. So they opened this whole other world to me. And then they got transferred to Iran. And I lost contact with them then for almost 30 years. And some times ago, I was in New York and visiting a nephew, and he remembered these people. He said, "Do you remember those Americans you were very friendly with as a kid?" I said, "Yeah. What was their name again?" And I still remembered their names, the street they lived in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Wow.
And he said, "You still remember?" I said, "Yeah, it's D Street, Lincoln, Nebraska." So we picked up the phone, got onto the operator, and we found them again. And so I ended up going to Lincoln, Nebraska, and was able to tell them. They had no idea of the impact they had on me. They just thought I was this young Irish kid. So to go there and tell them, look, this is where I am now, and I'm a therapist, and blah blah blah. They were like, wow. So I often said they sort of were very influential in my life, hugely influential, actually. Yeah. And the other person is my husband. I mean, he has just been, wow, just so. I get very emotional when I talk about him but he knows this. He knows this. Even when we're fighting, he still knows this. He really taught me how to love. I really didn't fully grasp what love meant. I thought I did until I met him. And he helped me heal hugely from much of that early childhood trauma. He was really influential and helped me heal. I get a little emotional saying that, but it's very true. And introduced me to his family. And I'm now part of this big extended Italian family, which I adore, and they adore me. And so, yeah. So they've been the two big personal impacts on my life. And professionally, I would say Bob and Rita Resnick have been just incredibly influential in my professional development. Yeah, they encouraged me to be me as a therapist. And just be me, not to try and be a therapist. Yeah, they gave me full permission, just be you. And I found it very therapeutic. And yeah.
Okay. So one more of the sort of more personal questions before we get a bit more into the professional side is how do you experience yourself as a man, or within your gender or in your masculinity, if you'd like to say anything about that?
I think it's a pretty complex question of what defines male. I don't see myself as male in the traditional sense of the word of what that means. I think gender is complex for me. I'm very aware that there's a very powerful feminine side. There are many parts to my identity. I don't see myself just fixed as a male.
Okay, and I'm sorry for making that assumption from the beginning.
No, but I mean, I don't see it fixed. I mean, I think I wouldn't identify as gender fluid, or I just don't see myself identifying mostly with being male in the traditional sense of the word. And I certainly think that has influenced my identity as what it means to be gay and to be male. Because I think the gender that you're assigned and how the world restricts that informs how you see yourself and how you see the world. And as time goes on, I think my lens is widening hugely. Absolutely. Yeah, my lens is really widening. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to pry, so I mean that's.
Oh no, pry! I'm absolutely fine. I mean, I'm finding this actually quite enjoyable and helpful. And when I talk about gender, I mean, I just finished a workshop with some wonderful group of students in Zagreb where we experimented with gender, and it was as liberating for me as it was for them, because I discovered parts of myself that I didn't think existed. I went, wow, and that was both exciting and scary. It's sort of like, wow, this is here, but I've never played with that before. So yeah, so I find the whole concept of gender very, very exciting now, and I'm aware it's a really important theme therapeutically. In my work here in a small village on the southwest coast of Ireland, gender identity is a really big issue.
I imagine. So switching tracks a little bit, in the next question would be, how did you come to Gestalt? Because I now have a gap in your history from when you left a house in flames and met these Americans and became a therapist. What happened in the middle there?
I've come to Gestalt therapy through a very circuitous route. I was lecturing in gastronomy. I had been in psychoanalysis doing my own therapy. which seemed fine at the time. And I was doing some research on a project on hunger, because I was teaching a class on gastronomy. And I came across ego, hunger, and aggression, thinking it would give me something about hunger. And I went, wow. One, I didn't understand very much of it. This is too goddamn complex. And it wasn't really what I was looking for. And yet it really got my attention. And I thought, wow. So I eventually got my teeth into it. Mm-hmm. Said to my analyst, what's this Gestalt therapy all about? And he said, oh, you don't want to go there. They're all crazy. They're all, you don't want to go there.
Pretty much, yeah. Of course.
That to me was like telling me you got to go there. So I started researching, blah, blah, blah. Found out that there was a really big Gestalt community in Cork City at that time. And there was a professor at the university who ran a degree course in Gestalt therapy, which was one of the few in Western Europe that had a degree course at university level. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. So I found myself a Gestalt therapist and I started to come alive. She was wonderful and totally the opposite to the psychoanalysis. And I started discovering parts of me that were just untapped for years. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And during the course of my treatment with her, she said, you know what? I'd already done some part-time courses in psychology and in general counseling, addiction counseling. And she said, this course at the university, I think would really suit you. Would you like to give it a go? And I said, I don't want to be a therapist. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. And she said, I think you should do the first year. The personal development part will be really good for you. Do the first year and see. And of course, it fell hook, line, and sinker. Loved it. They invited very few of us to go forward to take the degree course, and I was one of them, and never looked back since. That was it. I was lucky to be able to change career and set up a practice, and then following that, I'd done a postgraduate degree in integrative psychotherapy. So I brought the two together. So I'm a therapist by default, actually.
And so what is it that you found in Gestalt? What is it that caught your attention or captivated you somehow?
The possibility to be me. I didn't have to be anybody other than me. I just found that concept just illuminating. I always had this idea that, to be a therapist, you had to be very serious and you had to have the tweed jacket with the leather patches and you had to look very wise with a beard and,
I don't have any of that.
You don't have any of that? I'd love to hear yours. But that was sort of the image in my head. And that there would be this screen between me and other. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'd lived with screens since I was a young man. I didn't want screens. So when they encouraged me, look, just be you. Say what you feel. Say what's happening for you. Share it with the client. I went, really? You can do that? I said, yeah. Tell them what's happening for you. So it became dialogical. And then, of course, when I met Bob and Rita Resnick, they took that to a whole other level and really helped me be me. And so I like the idea that Gestalt therapy allowed me to be authentic at many different levels.
I'm also wondering, I guess it would be like the part 2 for the ego, hunger, and aggression coming from gastronomy. What you find, if you find any kind of parallel between those sort of creative processes or even the
absolutely.
eating and feeding processes.
To me, that was the part that got me when I got into ego, hunger, and aggression. And of course, now my interest when I work with food issues is I'm really more interested in how we eat, not necessarily what we eat. I'm more interested in the how we choose our foods, how we chew, how we assimilate, how long do we chew, how do we know that's what we like to eat? Are we just following the taste that was given to us, or have we explored other cuisines, other cultures? how do you know you don't like something if you haven't tried it? So it's engaging with difference. So through food, we can actually do wonderful therapy. Really important. So, I mean, that then was right up my street, and the two blended together very well. How we introject through food. So, you must finish your food, clear the plate.
I ask because
hungry.
Mexico is a huge food-oriented culture. And
Yes.
just the eating and the preparing and I mean the rituals and the regions, and it's just there's so much material as a Gestaltist in Mexico with food. Yes. I just wondered if
Yes, and of course coming from Ireland, where we've had a famine, where we lost millions of people during the Irish potato famine, that has had a huge impact psychically on how we approach food. So it's there, it's in our DNA. And I find it both as a culinary person and as a therapist, I find our relationship with food really interesting.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with the abundance and the scarcity kind of experiences. Exactly. I've noticed that with a lot of Canadians who have come from war survivors.
Yes.
And so many different wars.
Exactly. And also there are many other issues that I'm very interested in terms of social justice and in terms of having access to decent, healthy food. Where nowadays the poor are living on a diet of fast food, non-nutritious food, and they're nutritionally actually quite poor.
Yes.
So having access to good, clean water, food, housing, all of that to me is really, really important.
So another question that I have would be how Gestalt has affected you as a person.
Again, if I go back, it keeps coming back to being authentic. It has supported me to be truly who I am, to have a voice. I never thought I had a voice. I never thought I could impact the field. I always thought the field would impact me since I was a young man. And that power dichotomy was really very big for me. So Gestalt therapy allowed me to find my voice, to speak up, to think that I had something important to say, and that I had a right to say that. It allowed me to express my sexuality. It gave me permission to be fully me. Back in the day when that wasn't okay here in Ireland, and it certainly was very risky to be a gay man. It wasn't supported very well. And I think I've gone on a sort of a parallel process. My personal journey and Ireland's historical journey has been very much in tandem. Whereas now we live in a very open society, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's really wonderful to live here now as a gay man and as a gay couple. We live very freely and openly, and so Gestalt therapy certainly has supported me to be me and to bring all of me to the table. All my parts. Yeah.
Okay. And does anything come to mind as a particular challenge that you've run into? A specific challenge? It can be a moment, a clinical moment, or a challenge in more general terms?
In terms of my work or my personal life?
Either way.
Either way. I think with my work, sometimes it's not to impose my worldview on others, and sometimes that's a challenge for me. My worldview is mine, and it's that struggle about dealing with difference and sitting at the boundary of difference. And sometimes when I meet intransigence or someone who's really definite in their belief system and they're not budging, sometimes I find that hard because I can be a little pushy. In my work, I tend to push a little. So sometimes I have to, yeah, really? I didn't pick that up. I didn't pick that up at all.
No, not at all.
No, I didn't pick that up at all. So sometimes I have to pull back a little bit and realize that maybe that person is doing the best they can. That's as far as they can go. Sometimes when I meet homophobia straight on, I can find that difficult. I sometimes find it hard to sit in the same room where there's, you know, a lot of homophobic language or projections onto me. That can be difficult sometimes. Yet I also try and balance it with, and I do believe they're doing the best they can, because they're coming from the same ground that I grew up in, and they too are struggling. So holding that balance sometimes is difficult for me.
That sounds very gracious.
And difficult. And difficult sometimes. Yeah. It's a challenge.
And on the other side of that, of course. And on the other side of that, what would you say has been one of your, I struggle to find the words for this, but I guess I call it sort of a greatest moment or an experience that was really satisfactory or of fulfillment for you, either professionally or personally?
Well, I've had two. When I was working as a lecturer in gastronomy, I was also on the national team, the culinary team. We competed internationally. So when I won my first gold medal for cooking, that was really big. I mean, wow, that was a really big moment in terms of my self-confidence, my self-esteem. To win a gold medal was pretty big. So I always sort of go back to that. It sort of changed.
What did you make?
I made this is, oh my God, you're taking me down memory lane now, and I sort of like it. This is, oh my God, it must be 30 years ago. I made a lamb dish, fillets of lamb stuffed with an orange filling and wrapped in puff pastry and baked and done with an orange sauce. It had never been done before. That mixture had never been done before, and it snatched the gold. They told me I had it won even halfway through the competition, because they could get a sense of what was coming. So yeah, that was a really big moment for me. Yeah. And professionally, I had one experience not so many years ago where I was working with a couple, with a guy who was really, really stuck in expressing himself to his wife. He found it very difficult to express himself emotionally, and he was getting really frustrated. And each session, the frustration was reaching new levels, until one day he burst out and he looked at her and he said, "You will not make me talk that gay language like the therapist guy." And I went, bingo, we won. And I said, "Who's the gay therapist?" So I used my humor, which I thought was quite funny. I said, "Who's the gay therapist?" And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, aren't you gay?" And I said, "Well, maybe. But you think if you share your emotions with her that you'll end up like me?" And he went, "Yes." And then he started crying, and a whole other world emerged, where he had been a sensitive kid who wrote poetry and love songs, and he was deeply shamed for that, and learned to be the type of male that his culture said he should be, and had spent his entire life framed, as I would call it, and certainly wasn't going to show any soft emotions. He considers soft emotions linked into being homosexual or gay. So we had a wonderful dialogue, just wonderful. And this human being transformed within the next 6 sessions to the most beautiful, sweet, loving man. So I get quite emotional when I think of him, because I sometimes see them in our small town, and I see them walking together hand in hand. And so it's just one of those moments that you go, yeah, that's why you do therapy. Yeah.
So I'm also wondering, do you feel like you're part of the Gestalt community? Does that phrase mean anything to you?
Oh, absolutely. I feel very much part of the GATLA Gestalt community, Gestalt Associates Training in Los Angeles. And I searched for my place in the Gestalt world for years, and I could never find it. I found finding a community that worked for me really, really difficult. In fact, I was just looking for community. I didn't quite like a lot of the gay communities that I came in contact with. It just didn't work for me, weren't nourishing for me. I tried many different types of communities, never really felt it clicked. And then I found the GATLA community, and it was like, wow, this is it. It was big, it was broad church, it was multi-dimensional, it was multicultural, international, and I just loved it. Again, back to difference. I love the element of difference, of how we could come together from over 30 countries and meet together and find our common humanity, which was just so enriching for me. Really, really enriching. Yeah. So I feel very much part of that community. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate Bob having extended the invitation, which is how I reached you. So
yes.
You're also very generous and very welcoming in that community.
Yeah.
I've never been to a GATLA event. I've never managed to go
you must
because
come.
Kids and money and things like that.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes. Actually, the part of our story was it was my 40th birthday. It was a birthday, I'm not sure which. And I had just met Bob and Rita here in Ireland. They were teaching couples therapy. And I just fell in love with their work. I said, this is how I want to work. And I came home and I said to my husband, I was like totally animated and excited. And I said, I've met the Gestalt people I want to be like. This is how I want to do therapy. And he said, tell me about it. And I was all excited. And I was excited for weeks. And I said, they do this big international program, but we can't afford it. We never, because we were just building our home and blah, blah. And I said, I would love to go. I would really love to go. But look, let's get our house first and then we'll think about it in a few years. The following year on my birthday, he gave me a card and he secretly had contacted Bob and Rita. I think Rita, he'd been in communication with Rita, told her how excited I was and he wanted to give me this present. So they made it possible for both of us. They invited him, why don't you come along? So he's a craniosacral therapist. He's also now a very fine Gestalt therapist also. And they invited him to go. And so we had our first GATLA experience in Yellow in Norway. And Bob and Rita were there to meet us off the train. So that's how my sense of community began with GATLA. Yeah, and I've been going every year ever since. Yeah.
That's exciting. Oh. So I guess the last thing that I would ask is what's next? What would you like to do, either with your person or with Gestalt in the future? And also, on the other hand, where do you think Gestalt could or should be going?
Good question. Personally, I want to spend more time here in this beautiful part of the world. I'm an avid gardener, so I have a beautiful garden outside. I want to spend more time, slow down a little. I think the COVID pandemic really made me think about my pace of life and traveling and teaching. I still want to travel and teach, but not as much. So I've always been a teacher, but I don't want to do it as much. I think I want to slow down a little bit and enjoy life. Where I see Gestalt therapy going, I think there's a real opportunity for Gestalt therapy to be more community-based. I'd like us to have more of a social impact, to go back to our original roots, to express our views on social issues, whether it's racism, homophobia, the transgendered community, and the phobia that they're suffering right now. Working class people that get access to decent housing, decent food, decent medical care. I think we need to speak up more. I think we're in danger of getting lost in our middle class offices, and losing connection with the field outside, and losing language, the language of the field. We start, a lot of the time, I don't like conferences because they get so, they use so much therapeutic language. I get bored very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have a unique tool with Gestalt therapy, that we can use our voices to impact change outside, and to encourage our clients where necessary, and with clinical judgment, how to do that. And I think we need to use that very wisely. So that's where hopefully I would see Gestalt therapy having its voice. I think there's a danger that we're being subsumed by other therapies, and we're not identifying ourselves as a separate entity. So I think we need to speak up more.
Interesting. I very much agree. I just want to let you're saying sort of stand there. I'm wondering how that would look for you. I mean, you say speak up and use voice, but how?
I regularly speak on local radio on important issues. They invite me to speak, and I'll take every opportunity to give the Gestalt worldview on something. Write letters to editors, make statements, attend meetings, join protest marches, have our voices heard. Because I think when one part of the field is impoverished, all of the field is impoverished. And I think we really need to speak more about that as Gestalt therapists. That if my success is based on your impoverishment, that's not real success. So whether it's gender politics, whether it's social issues, access to healthcare, if only the rich can afford healthcare, that's not okay for me. And so I will speak about those issues very clearly.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add? Is there any part of yourself that you feel I've left out, or anything else you'd like to bring?
I'm not so sure. Oh, something that I think is important is when I'm training or working as a trainer, I always say to the students to remain humble. I have an aversion to snobbery, whether it's academic snobbery or social snobbery, or a sense of I know it all. I'm published now. I've written my paper. I published my book, and therefore I am. I always say stay humble. Stay open to new learning. The minute you think you know it all, which of course is typical Gestalt, you need to go back to the beginning and relearn again. So I hope personally I remain humble and open to new learning, and to be impacted, and keep dancing. I hope I can keep dancing for as long as I can, and singing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I've really appreciated getting to meet you.
You're very welcome. It's really nice to meet you. I liked our connection. I liked when you smiled at some of my answers. I think we may have some similar worldviews.
I would love to sit down and have a meal with you somewhere sometime.
Oh, preferably in Mexico.
Wonderful. That sounds like a date. So if it's okay with you, we will leave it here then.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Nice to meet you.
Same.
Ciao.